Hi, welcome back to the video snippet version of Ballads, a Tinker's Dozen. Today we're going to finish up the ninth story behind the ninth song in the book. So, if you're ready, sit back, relax, and we'll get back to little Mattie Groves. Here we go. And little Bumpy Johnson heard what Miss St. Clair said. He knew that Big Ed would want to know, so he ran all the way to Broadway to the IND. He got off the subway at Nassau Street Station and ran 12 blocks north on Church Street and then half a mile east to the little joint on Mott Street where he knew that Big Ed would be counting the take. Mattie took a little nap. When he opened his eyes, he smiled, more than half to himself, expecting to see the fine brown frame of Miss St. Clair lying next to him. He saw instead Big Ed scowling at him and chewing on a big cigar. "How do you like my bed?" the big man said, not raising his voice in anger, but instead seeming eager to hear Mattie's answer to his questions. "How do you like my silk sheets? How do you like my woman?" Mattie's courage grew as Big Ed appeared to be too calm to mean him any harm. "Your bed is the softest I've ever had, and your sheets are the smoothest. But Miss Stephanie is the softest and smoothest of all. Best I've ever had." "Get up, small fry, you skinny little bastard," Big Ed's big baritone voice roared. "Get up right now. Nobody in this Big Apple will say that I bloodied the sheets of my own bed." Mattie pushed himself back on the mattress to get as far away as he could from Big Ed's threats. The cast-iron rods of the headboard dug into his back and stopped him from edging any further away from the gigantic, angry man. "I can't get up," Mattie said, softly at first, and then more loudly as he realized that the big man was just standing at the foot of the bed, squeezing his hands into fists and turning a deeper and deeper shade of red. And then Mattie saw something that made his heart skip a beat and brought a chill to his skin. Big Ed opened his jacket and reached inside into the pocket of his vest. A second later, he had pulled out something that was shiny like pearls, and a second after that, Ed pushed a button and a spear-pointed blade slid out of the handle and locked into place with a frightening click. And Mattie's fear then made him say, "I won't get up. You've got a knife and I've got nothing." Big Ed just laughed at that. "Yeah, I've got my Italian switchblade. It cost me half a day's take from the numbers, but you can have it if you want. And you can come at me and try to kill me first before I end your miserable life," he said, and threw the knife at Mattie. Mattie ducked into the covers and heard the knife hit the wall behind where his head had been. Then Mattie turned and grabbed the handle of the knife, pulling it out of the wall. He jumped out of bed wearing nothing but his argyle socks and garters. As the naked man moved toward him, Big Ed reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a pair of brass knuckle dusters that he slipped onto his right hand, as he had done 100 times before. Mattie saw his chance and lunged forward toward Big Ed, thrusting with the knife. Big Ed put up his left arm to block Mattie's attack, and the knife sank into Ed's forearm, missing the bone, the blade sliding up to its hilt in the silk of the big man's shirt and the muscle that lay beneath. Ed howled with pain and pulled his arm up, and a fountain of blood sprayed over Mattie and the bed behind him. The warm blood was slippery, and Mattie lost his grip on the knife. With the stiletto sticking out of his forearm, Big Ed reached out with his now bloody left hand and grabbed Mattie by the neck. As Mattie struggled to escape Ed's grasp, the big man punched the brass knuckles into Mattie's stomach. When Mattie doubled over in pain, unable to breathe, Ed hit him with the brass on the side of his head, and Mattie dropped to the floor. Big Ed knelt down over Mattie and spent 5 long minutes rearranging Mattie's face. When Ed was through, Mattie had no face left. What had once been chin and lips and nose and eyes and brows and ears was now a bloody pulp that might have been ground beef fresh from the butcher. Big Ed got up from where he had knelt and sat on the edge of the bed. Miss St. Clair was huddled by the headboard, as naked as when she had been born, attempting to hide in the pillows. "Come here, Miss Stephanie," Ed demanded with a laugh. He pulled the woman to him and sat her on his knee. "Now, my little tomato," he asked, "who do you love the better of us, Mattie Groves or me?" Miss Stephanie St. Clair blinked the horror from her eyes and sat up as straight as she could. She placed her little hand on Big Ed's chin and turned his face toward her. She smiled and sighed, almost too small and softly to be heard, and then she said in a clear and haughty voice, "Well, big man, I'd rather have a kiss from Mattie's dead lips than anything you could give to me." And then she laughed and laughed and laughed. Big Ed sat very still for a few seconds. Then he grabbed Miss Stephanie by the throat and stood up, holding her so that her feet wriggled a foot above the floor as she struck him with her little fist, trying to find a way to breathe. He howled in pain at what she had said and threw her at the dressing table. When her head hit the looking glass and shattered the mirror, it left a bloody mark on the wall behind it. And suddenly, Miss Stephanie lay dead on the floor in front of him, her eyes staring at him, still and unfocused. Big Ed looked at her and then went to the front door of the apartment and shouted down the stairs, "Get up here, Valentine. Now, and bring the boys." Seconds later, Valentine, Narcisse, Dixie Davis, and Casper Holstein ran up the stairs. Valentine, of course, was the first to reach the open door and stopped short at the blood and the bodies he saw. "Go get the garbage truck," Big Ed said in a calm, quiet, menacing voice, "and put those two in back. Then take the truck to the garbage pier on 59th Street. Load them into a barge and take them out to sea. Dump them with the rest of the trash. Make sure no one sees." Dixie pulled the sheets off the bed, and Valentine and Casper wrapped up the two lovers in the silk sheets in which they had spent the afternoon. Valentine, a little guy, put Miss Stephanie's body over his shoulder and took her down the stairs. Casper had to have Dixie help him with what was left of Mattie. When the boys had left, Big Ed reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a new cigar, bit off the tip, and spat it out onto the apartment floor, and then lit the stogie from the pilot light on the stove. Then he walked over to the bed and found Miss Stephanie's overcoat. She wouldn't be needing it now, and tossed it onto the stove. Ed waited for a few minutes, enjoying his cigar and washing Mattie's blood off his hands and the knuckle duster in the apartment sink. Finally, the overcoat began to catch. The flames rose from the gray fabric. Big Ed walked to the pantry and looked through the shelves. He took a 5-pound sack of flour and a half, empty 50-pound can of Decker's quality lard and placed them on the part of the coat that was only smoking. He opened the can of lard and laid the lid on top of the smoldering coat. Then he turned and left, locking the apartment door behind him. By the time Ed had left the building and reached the corner, he heard the explosion. Looking back, he saw flames roaring out of the window of an apartment on the second floor. Someone, he thought, should call the fire department, but he had better things to do. An hour later, the two lovers were covered by a layer of chicken bones, spoiled milk in dirty bottles, newspaper, splintered boards, cast-off clothing, potato peelings, apple cores, onion skins, big metal tubs of rancid shortening, small tin cans, some with bits of Spam inside and others still smelling of sardines, rats and mice in the traps that they had been caught in, and other detritus of city discards. If either Mattie or Miss Stephanie had been alive to appreciate the peacefulness of it all, they might have enjoyed the quiet ride out to the dumping grounds, miles offshore, where the only sounds were the chugging engines of the tug that pushed the barge and the screeching of the seagulls that hovered over the garbage that floated on the ocean's surface for a while, before it sank to the bottom of the New Jersey Bight.